Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We have a great pleasure today having Dr. Mabid Ali Al-Jarhi, the current ISDB prize winner in Islamic economics. As he said during the lecture, he belongs to the second generation of Islamic economists. So it is indeed a great honor to have him with us. And we would like to ask him a number of questions with regard to the state of Islamic economics and the contributions that he has made in the area of Islamic economics and finance. Dr. Mabid Ali Al-Jarhi, it's been an honor to have you with us. First question that we would like to ask is, what is your view on the state of Islamic economics and finance globally? Do you think the current ecosystem in Islamic finance industry adequate enough to garner its potential to fulfill the promise of the founding fathers of Islamic economics and finance?
I mean, the Islamic finance industry has grown quite a bit and actually grown beyond expectations. But there is one thing that you have a growing industry which is still getting larger and larger, and another is whether the industry fulfills the model of Islamic finance that we all have in our mind. Obviously, the model has not been applied strictly, and it's becoming further and getting further and further from the true model that we have inherited from the time when Muslims had a one Islamic state under the Umayyads, the Abbasids, the Ottomans, and so on.
Yeah.
So we need just to join with growth, mixed growth with reform.
Right.
So that we have to reform the industry and see where the incentives to keep the practice as close as possible to the true model while growth. So the Islamic financial industry has the size, has the capabilities, has the experience, but it does not have the true model yet.
Right.
And I think the responsibility of this lies on regulators. Regulators should become much more interested in correct Islamic financing than they are now.
Okay.
They are more now ambivalent, indifferent, but they should pay more attention to reforming the industry.
Right. In the following questions, we would like to know, what do you think are the top 3 fallacies imbued in neoclassical economics that have created inefficiencies in the economy?
The first fallacy is actually bad use of mathematics.
All right.
That they try to imitate physicists. So they attempted to transform economics into applied mathematics. But they did not learn the mathematics from mathematicians.
Right.
They learned it from economists, from mathematical economists. And this caused them to miss the important developments in mathematical sciences. So this is the first thing which actually made neoclassical economics less of a scientific field. The second thing here is that they also always believed that you build any system from the down up,
Okay.
from the down to the top. And that's what's called microeconomic foundations.
Mhm.
But it looks like, of course, physicists believed that a long time ago, and astronomers.
Mhm.
But then, I think in 1975, they found this theory to be incorrect.
Mhm.
And now, macro systems or macroeconomic systems cannot be directly related to the micro systems. In other words, you cannot generalize from the behavior of the micro unit, that's the individual or the firm, to the macroeconomy. So this insistence on building from the micro units to the macro units, or building the macro structure from the micro units, which is called extreme reductionism, actually cost economics or neoclassical economics a great deal. The third thing here is that they never gave the details of the system, of the economic system, enough attention.
Mhm.
They were building a theory that justifies the system, and they were not building a system that justifies the
Right.
theory.
Okay.
So they should have started with the theory, and then they tried to say, well, okay, what system would implement that theory?
Mhm.
They didn't do that.
Right.
So the neoclassical economics is just a pure justification of market capitalism, which is a failure, because this is market capitalism is an unstable system.
Mhm.
It is suffering crisis after crisis after crisis, and nobody has done anything about it.
Mhm. Mhm. And you argue, Dr. Mabit, that in your work, in your article, that the ability of Islamic finance to correct for both types of inefficiencies, Hosius and Samuelson Friedman, will be extremely weakened with Islamic banks mimicking conventional banks. Why do you think that is the case?
Because you see, if there were a sick person who required antibiotics, if you give him diluted antibiotics, he will not recover.
Mhm.
So you have to give him pure, undiluted antibiotics.
Mhm.
Islamic finance now is not really, or does not have the strong elements of dealing or treating the inefficiencies of the neoclassical economic system.
Mhm.
So we must reform it in order to do that job.
And would you say that the other cause can also be due to the heavy reliance on the conventional model of banking system?
Well, you see, conventional finance somehow is more considered to be more attractive to bankers. To them, it's easier to understand because they were born and raised in the conventional banking school. It does not require too many contracts.
Mhm.
It is. It's not as complicated in contracting as Islamic finance. It also requires serious investment, and that includes feasibility studies, due diligence, and things like that, which bankers do not like to do.
Indeed.
Bankers do not want to take risk on the on investment. They only want to take risk on collateral and give you the loan as long as you have the collateral and you do what you wish with it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that actually creates a strong incentive on the side of bankers to mimic conventional finance.
Dr. Mabit, if you allow me to bring our discussions to the demand side, how different do you think is the utility functions of Muslims from the rest of the societies at large? Or to what extent does the value proposition of Islamic teaching shape up their preference and behavior?
You see, we Muslims, if we were taught in the Islamic school of thought, in other words, if we had intellects which would be Islamically oriented, our concerns would be different. In other words, we would be more concerned about the how to apply things and how to, in other words, we would continue to pay attention to ibadat, but at the same time should give more attention to shara'a, to economics, politics, social system, and so on. But you see, despite that, we can take pride in one thing, that we Muslims think more about economics and about politics and about social relations, social behavior, than the followers of other religions.
Right. You know, you successfully designed the first Islamic trade finance program among OIC member countries in 1976, 1978. Can you tell us more a bit about that, please? What motivated you to design it, and how impactful would you say it had been?
Well, this is a very dear subject to my heart. Actually, what happened is that when the Islamic Development Bank was established, the countries, the member countries, entrusted their subscriptions in the capital to the Saudi Arabian Monetary Agency. And the Saudi Arabian Monetary Agencies deposited this money with international conventional banks, because there were no Islamic banks, international or non-international. So by the time this bank started operations, interest had accumulated on these funds. So the first thing that the IDB thought about was what to do with these riba funds. They gathered, and I was working in the economic and policy planning department at the time. We invited a big collection of fuqaha in order to advise us on this. And they, after debating for 2 days, they said, there is no advice. You get rid of this money, you stop putting your money at interest, and then we will tell you what to do with the money, the interest that you've already gained. So the president of the IDB at that time, Dr. Ahmed Muhammad Ali, asked me as the head of that economic department to find a solution. So the solution was to use these funds in financing trade among Muslim countries. And we, alhamdulillah, received a request, the first request to do that from Algeria, to finance a deal to import coke from Turkey in order to be used by the Algerian steel industry. So we were able, at that time, we made this trade finance program, but we made it in general form, not to apply particularly to the case between Algeria and Turkey. And once it was approved by the board of directors, it became a rule.
Right.
And the first deal was that Algerian-Turkish deal, and then it started moving on to more deals until they had a program, and then this program for financing trade among Muslim countries tend to be an institution, a member of the IDB group, or a corporation.
All right, okay. Oh, very enlightening and very motivating indeed. You know, we, as you might have realized, we are now living in totally different era than your era.
Yes.
With the whole digital economy, fourth industrial revolution, the use of fintech and everything. And one thing that cannot be avoided is discussing about the cryptocurrency. Right?
Yes.
Do you believe, but first of all, what is your view on these things? Do you believe that fiat money can be replaced with cryptocurrency?
You see, first of all, the cryptocurrency is a misnomer. What is called cryptocurrencies now is just nothing but gambling assets. There is a gambling club for this currency. People who deal with it, gamble in it on a daily basis. They set prices and they buy and sell. So it's just like a gambling club. And it is not a means of exchange. It cannot be used as a store of value because its value is very fluctuates sharply from one day to another. And third, it's exclusive to some club. You cannot get in unless you belong.
Right, right.
The fourth point, which is actually, it puts it in the black economy. Because you see, these cryptocurrencies can be means to launder funds for criminal actions and so on. So I don't see any future for this except that they would remain as gambling casinos.
Right, right. Thank you, Dr. Mabid. You said in the lecture that you belong to the second generation of Muslim economists, although I thought you belonged to the first generation, so I was mistaken. If turning back the clock is possible, and we all know that it's not possible, what would you have done differently that would make a huge difference to the progress of Islamic economics and finance?
You know, first of all, I could be belonging to the first generation because of age.
All right.
But age here is not a factor.
Okay.
It is the way of thinking.
Okay.
And what I really would have liked to do is to establish a school of economics, a modern school of economics that attracts good brains, good economists, and raise Islamic economists so that I can cut the period short, so that we would have been able to replace the second generation with what I want to have as a third generation. I would have liked to have a faster, a quicker way. I would have also not hurried so much about applying Islamic finance without having agreements about how to build it up and how to regulate it. It looks like this was built on individual efforts. You know, like Dubai Islamic Bank and the Kuwait Finance House. They were built on individual efforts. There was no regulatory framework, and the regulatory framework still has not matured yet. So this was a mistake, and it should have been
structure.
Sort of planned over time,
Right.
so that it could be made properly and would be more successful.
So there should have been a roadmap.
But you see, also it is in countries where they had more financial development, they were too enthusiastic. They were overly enthusiastic in innovation, which actually took their model away much farther from the paradigm.
You know, it still feels surreal for me to be here with you and asking a few questions, because I still remember.
It is my pleasure.
Obviously everybody would like to maintain the positive energy spirit despite the age and your level of seniority. And last question, perhaps, if you allow me, Dr. Mabid, what will be your advice to the millennial generation who is interested in Islamic economics?
First of all, to study the serious critique of neoclassical economics and not to fall prey for this type of economics. Second, to treat Islamic economics as an analytical discipline and not as a textual discipline. And third, to prepare themselves to be good policy makers rather than working for some religious institutions. And of course, the last advice is to keep a big distance between economics and fiqh. Do not mix them. Although Islamic economics must be based on fiqh rules and must benefit from that, but it cannot use the methodology of fiqh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mabid Ali Al-Jarhi. I cannot feel more delighted to be with you. It has been a great honor. Thank you very much. Jazakallah khairan.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.